Hello and welcome to our special broadcast here. I'm Maha Siddiqui, and joining me on this digital broadcast is Sanjay Suri, live from Europe. Sanjay, the G20 Summit is going to start tomorrow. There are several issues that are to be discussed by the leaders, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still ongoing. These are the biggest economies of the world, representing 80% of the world GDP. But have they been able to mitigate the fallout of COVID-19 on the global economy?
Well, not quite. And as the Prime Minister indicated before leaving, that really is what this meeting is about. The agenda is not as sharply defined as the agenda for the COP26 summit to follow in Glasgow, where at least we know what we are fighting for and fighting about. Here, as the Prime Minister indicated, this is intended to take stock of the situation and to exchange ideas. He mentioned that this would be done in relation to people's health and to economic health. And I do suspect that the economic health is going to come first because these are, as you say, the biggest economies in the world. People are looking for an economic rebuilding following the hit taken by the economies through COVID. And that is going to be top of the agenda.
Sanjay, 75% of the global trade also takes place between the G20 countries. We've seen trade issues also seeing some sort of hurdles during the COVID-19 pandemic. So much was spoken about cooperation, coordination, but we saw global supply chains being hit. One example of that, Sanjay, was with India itself. Serum Institute of India red flagged the issue that America had, in fact, enacted its Defense Reduction Act, which meant that the American companies had to prioritize for their country first and vaccine manufacturing there before they allowed some of the raw materials for vaccine manufacturing to go to other countries. India's manufacturing cost-effective vaccines, and these hurdles are something that is glaring at this point, Sanjay, when we are seeing massive vaccine inequity as well. Do you think the G20 countries need to address this at this forum?
Without doubt, the Prime Minister will bring this at the summit. We've seen nationalism at its most raw just at the time when it needed most to be superseded. Nations needed to get over this. This was a human issue right across the world, and that is when you needed to drop barriers to the lowest possible. The very opposite has happened. There has been resistance in Europe, and in the EU still continues to Covishield, which is just another brand name, if you like, for AstraZeneca. So they're okay with AstraZeneca, not with Covishield, because it's made in India. And that situation continues to date as far as the EU goes. With the UK, there was an issue earlier, and we've seen what that led to by way of travel issues that were fortunately resolved. So there is, you're quite right to say, of course, Maha, this is going to be a real issue at the G20 summit. This kind of drive to put up barriers when people need to drop barriers, the need for medicine to flow. We've had some offers from the US, from the UK, that they will give vaccines to poor countries, but these are token little amounts and a very small fraction. It's well short of the substantive and real needs there are out there.
Absolutely, Sanjay. You were talking about a show which goes on CNN News 18 or World 360. You were talking about how some of the African countries, the vaccinations are low as only percent, whereas countries where you live in UK, there are more than one vaccine doses which could be available for one single person. Isn't that correct, Sanjay? How is this going to be resolved? It needs to. These poor countries deserve these vaccines.
The difference, Maha, is not one of gradation at different points along the spectrum. It is outrageous and extreme. And I know these are adjectives, but the numbers speak. In Kenya, it is, for example, and it's not the only African country, let's take a couple. Kenya is less than 3%. In Ethiopia, it's less than 1% that have been vaccinated. UK has 9 vaccines for every person who is considered eligible. Some in stock, the rest on order. This is a huge difference. And when the UK then says that through this stock, and it's not just the UK, it's other countries, it's the US, it's the EU countries, they say that from these massive buildups of stock, we will give a few million to this country, that country. This is optics. This is optics that really ought not to mislead anyone. There is a very glaring inequity, as you call it, and that is something that ought to be addressed first. But it is very likely that G20, again, as you point out, it's a rich countries club, the second in line after the G7, and the drive will be to build economic recovery. People want money raised, people want growth. Those are the numbers people are going to be concerned about first, not the numbers of people in the have-not countries who have not been vaccinated.
But Sanjay, don't you think that the leaders need to understand the fact that unless and until a large population globally is vaccinated, new variants will keep emerging, and this pandemic is not likely then to stop anytime soon, which is already having its effects on the global economy. Some of the countries are finding it so tough to get out of the backlash of the pandemic that it has seen on people's employment as well. So many people have lost their jobs. All this is impacting economies of individual countries and the global economy at large. Then why is it that they are still hesitant in being able to share?
Well, again, the answer is in the images before us. Prime Minister Modi arriving in Rome to welcome. There have been talks between India and Italy already leading up to this. Piyush Goyal represented India, and the drive is to find ways of growth and towards making agreements at G20 and through G20 that drive growth. The issue of inequity is certain to come up. It's not possible to avoid that. What we do need to look out for is what countries agree to do beyond saying the right things, because we've been hearing the right things ever since it began. The conduct is not in line with speech and sentiment. And this is going to be really the human challenge for the G20, and we're seeing the beginnings of that before us. Whether it can come up with a global conscience that goes beyond expression and towards action.
Okay. Sanjay, also, can a country like India, which is a developing country, which is doing well, compared to all other developing countries, if I may say so, can it still be the voice of the poorer world at such a forum?
India is sort of straddling that divide, and I think diplomats are, weaving their path through both, because India certainly is a major developing country, and as a strong developing country and a country that is being taken more and more seriously, it has very smart diplomats speaking for it and through it for others potentially. So, at the climate change summit that we see ahead, most certainly there are issues that developing countries face in common. We have had all sorts of promises from developed countries that have not been met, and the promises were not very spectacular or convincing to begin with. So, India is a voice for those countries, but India is looking for India is ambitious. India is looking for a place in the rich club, and the G20 is that. Given also that India's growth is being put up to estimated 9.5% by the IMF. Earlier it was 6% because the economy is doing very well, and also FDI to India has risen significantly, whereas across the world it has fallen substantially. So India is coming across as a convincing player, and India wants to be seen to be that.
Closely associated with the targets that probably many of these rich countries will place in the near future would be on the issue of climate change, I believe, also because it's already showing its impacts across the world. We've seen untimely rains in India, we've seen flash floods in China, we've seen the frequency of storms going up in America, wildfires too in America as well. Sanjay, will the G20 countries look at the issue of sustainable development as well, or are we leaving that largely for COP26 in Glasgow, where many of the leaders will then go to from Rome to Glasgow?
Well, the climate issue is certain to come up at the G20 as well. And the COP26 President Alok Sharma has said that he will use the G20 forum, and the UK will want to use it along with other partners from developed countries to, as so to speak, name and shame countries not doing enough. Name and shame is not the expression he used, but what he meant was not very different from this. So this pressure on India is going to begin at G20 itself. And this, from all indications so far, and from all conversations we've had with responsible people in the thick of decision making, it is very clear now that India is not going to declare a zero emissions target date. And of course, October 12th was the date which has passed. There was still, of course, possibility, and there still is theoretically, for India to come up with a number and a date. But India is taking the position that it is a responsible country, it is making its move, and it is moving towards a non-fossil energy generation, and that it is committed to doing so, but it will not be dictated to by countries who have not even done the minimum that they promised to. So to that extent, India will take a strong line for itself and for other developing countries.
Sanjay, I had a chat with the British High Commissioner to India, Alex Ellis, today, and I asked him a similar question, that this expectation from India, or the pressure that has been built over the last few years, that India should commit to net zero emissions the foreseeable future, are they not unfair, considering India has conscientiously met its climate targets, and also the fact that it's a developing country and developing goals will not be met? The answer was that the world hopes that India will come out with targets that will have consequences in the right direction, not just for India, but for the world. Direct response there to the unfair bit. But Sanjay, India sending out that message that it is fair to expect of India, despite the effort India has put in the climate goals, to expect zero emission?
This is fundamentally a playoff between energy and the environment. This is what we're talking about. There's no way India can give up on the need of its people for energy. India's energy consumption is 1/3 of the world average. Uh, the energy consumption of the developed nations is about 15 times that of India. India is a per capita very low consumer of energy. It has growth. There's no way that the Indian government can tell people in Delhi that, well, we go back to the summer months when getting electricity was a lottery. It would disappear for hours, sit and sweat. India cannot tell its farmers in the villages that you will not get electricity supply. Currently, this bulk of this is from fossil fuels, and India is making a move to get away from that. But India is not necessarily going to be able to do that at the speed that is expected of it. It cannot do that to a timetable that has been given by developed countries. India's position is that it is mindful of that, mindful of the need to cut emissions. It is doing all it can and more, but it will not be dictated to in the language of the developed countries and to their timetable and to their system of measuring this.
Sanjay, we leave it at that, because this is an issue that we will discuss threadbare again on one of our digital chats early next week, when the COP26 kick off and the leaders really come out and express their views and put across their targets, individual country targets as well, that they are looking at to mitigate the climate crisis. Clearly, high time to do that already, with the effects being felt across the world. Sanjay, many thanks for joining us with this chat, largely on G20. We'll keep coming back to you for more details.
Great chatting. Thank you.